Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video we are doing a sew along. But before we get right on into the sew along, I wanted to give you a little bit of a pattern review for the sew along, which is New Look 6668 as part of project number 3 for the Sew What series that we talked about 2 projects ago. All right, now before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe button, and also click on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the pattern review first before going into the sew along. All right, so I don't want to take too much time, so we're going to go straight on into the pattern review first, starting with the pattern description. So this pattern is a Mrs. V-neck sleeveless top that has pleat details on the front and an elastic waist. All right, now the skirt is a pull-on skirt with elastic. It also have a bias yoke and also have a lower facing a wide hem as well. So that is the pattern description. Now the notions that you need for this pattern is just elastic. I believe I use 1-inch elastic in order to create both the top as well as the skirt. So fabric used, I already posted the fabric that I used for it. I use cotton or woven fabric because this is a 2-piece woven set that I mentioned in the last project number 2 when I showcased the pattern for the next sew along. I did say this will be a 2-piece woven set. So for the top that I have on, I use 100% cotton. It is, I believe it's called So Classic Iris fabric. I'll go ahead and put it up, and I also put the fabric for the skirt in my my April sewing plans. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the description box below as well as on the screen as well. All right, so that's the fabric used. So let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces, which I'm not gonna get to completely right here simply because we're going to go into the sew along and you'll see the pattern pieces again. But for the top you need 9 pieces, and for the skirt you need 3. So the top you need your front, your back, your front facing, your back facing, your armhole facing if you are doing the sleeveless version, which I made a modification to mine, which is the puff sleeves, which I will talk about here shortly on modification. After you do the armhole facing, you will also need your casing, which is pattern piece number 6, I believe. And then you need your peplum front and your peplum back, okay? Those are the pieces that you need for the top. For the skirt, you only need 3, which is 10, 11, and 12. 10 is your front and back for your skirt. 11 is your bias, your bias yoke, front and back. And then pattern piece number 12 is the lower facing of your hem, all right? So those are the pattern pieces that you need in order to construct both the top and the skirt. The size that I cut is a size 18. And for the pattern sizing, it just comes in one envelope. And I believe the pattern sizing is 6 to, I want to say 20 or 22. I'll put it up on the screen because I can't remember correctly. All right. Now, regarding modifications, the only modification that I made for this pattern was to install puff sleeves, which the sleeves is from New Look 6698, which I did a sew along for. So you can look up and see that link for the sew along, and I will also put at the end screen at the end of this video as well, so you can continuously watch this sew along, and then at the very end you could go and see that sew along for 6698, which was the sew along for the puff sleeve blouse that I did. All right, and I'll go ahead and make sure that I put that in for you. All right, so did it look like the photo and the drawing on the envelope? Of course it did, with slight modifications. So yes, it looks like it, but the only thing I did was a modification of adding puff sleeves to this top instead of the sleeveless version. In the sew along, you will hear me say that I'm not going to do the sleeveless version. And the reason why is because I noticed with sleeveless tops, I have a little bit of gaping because of the way I am built up top. So for my heavy chest chicks or females, or ladies, I should say, or women, all right, because I know different areas use different terms for females. So for my heavier busted women, I I would say that if you plan on doing a sleeveless version, take caution, because when I tried my top on, I did not like it. I didn't have gaping. It just shows the bra too much on the side, and I need a bra for this, okay? I can't go braless on this, so that's why I said, you know what? I'm going to be adding some sleeves, and because hashtag So Maxi for Mother's Day is going on right now, I decided to make a statement and make a statement sleeve with these puff sleeves from New Look 6698. All right, so my likes and dislikes. So likes, I love the blouse and I like the skirt. Dislike, the skirt is way too long, so I cut off 4 inches from the bottom of just pattern piece number 10. However, it's still long after doing that. So I want to say that you might want to check and measure the top to the bottom of both 10, 11, and 12 and make your determination of how long you want your skirt, because even though mine's is long, I'm okay with the length because I did wear heels with it. So I'm okay with that. It's not gonna be a big deal for me, all right? No first time experiences whatsoever. Would I sew it again? No. I would not sew the skirt again because, like I said, it's too long. But the top, I would sew the top again and make slight modifications. Of course, I would make another sleeve detailed, like some cuffs, like I did for the blouse that I did not too long ago that I did a sew along for with the buttons. I called it the extended cuff blouse, I believe, because the cuffs is all the way up here to the elbows. I would do that again and just take the sleeve from that and put it on this top. But I think one and done for me on this pattern. I don't think I would necessarily sew it again, but this, I like the top, but the skirt, no. I like it, but I don't plan on sewing it again, just to be honest, all right? So my pattern, would I recommend this pattern to someone? Yes, I would, because it was a fun sew and it's a quick sew. And the skirt you can use for hashtag sewing 5 and below. Even though the series ended for season 1, season 2 will be coming back. Stay tuned for the date, but you can still use the hashtag for patterns that are 5 pattern pieces and less. So this will be going in sewing 5 and below. New Look 6668 for that. So now let's talk about my pattern rating. For this pattern, I'm going to rate this pattern a 3.5 out of 5. And the reason why is, one, the skirt is way too long. I don't know what height-wise that they were thinking when they decided on this skirt, because on the model on the envelope, it's like the skirt stopped right at, like, above her ankles. I remember on the pattern, I'm gonna put the pattern up, but it stopped a little bit above her ankles. On me, and I'm 5'5" and a half, don't leave out the half. If I would have done the whole thing like is, with no modifications and not chopping off that 4 inches, it would have been dragging the ground, okay? So I didn't like that. I think they should have told the entire length of the skirt when it's completely sewn together, all right? For the peplum, one thing that I dislike, or why I chose 3.5, is simply because it is short. The peplum did not give you 2 different lengths to where the peplum could be long or short. It's one length and it is super short. So I styled this 2 ways. I styled the peplum with some jeans, ripped jeans, and then I styled it with the skirt as well. But I want to say, if you style it with the skirt and the top together, it looks really awkward to wear the blouse on the outside. It's best to wear it on the inside of the skirt where you can see that skirt detail. You just will not see the peplum portion of the blouse, but I think it looked better on the inside, tucked into the inside of the skirt instead of the outside. All right, so that is the pattern review for New Look 6668. Let's go ahead and get right on into the sew along. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next sew along for the Sew What series. This is project number 3, the 2-piece woven set. We are using New Look 6668 in order to do the 2-piece. So I am doing both views on this pattern. If view A and view B. I am doing a solid for view A and a print for view B. So let's go ahead and talk about the tools and supplies you will need in order to construct this item. All right, so for the New Look 6668, regarding tools and supplies that you will need, of course you will need your scissors. I use one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there. I use rotary cutters at the sewing machine. Well, not at the sewing machine. I use one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there. I use my thread clippers at the sewing machine just to clip threads while I'm there. You're also going to need a seam ripper just in case you make a mistake and need to rip a seam out. Of course, get your point turner to poke out any of those sharp edges. I will also suggest a disappearing ink like Mark Be Gone in order to mark your dots as well. A pencil, if you need to make any adjustments, a pencil or a regular pen will help you there. I am also using a white water soluble marking pencil because I do have light fabric, and this is just basically to mark where my pleats are going to go, the direction, okay? And you're also going to need some pens to hold all of your items together. All right, now the only notion that you will need in order to construct the top and the skirt is elastic. So you will need 1 1/8 yards of 1 inch wide elastic for both A and B. All right, so that's all the supplies that you will need in order to construct this 2-piece woven set for the Sew What series. So let's go ahead and get right on into the pattern, looking at the inside of the pattern instructions, as well as going over the pieces you will need in order to construct the top. So we're doing both in this tutorial. We're doing the top as well as the skirt, but we're gonna go ahead and get into the top first. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern instructions for New Look 6668. We are covering the top right now, and then we'll talk about the skirt later on in this video. So first, let's go over the pattern pieces you will need. I'll show you that, but just make note that you will need pattern piece 1 through 9. Also, you will need to cut pattern piece number 1, 2, and 5 with the wrong side of the pattern piece down. I'm sorry, the right side of the pattern piece down, the wrong side of the pattern piece up, to where you could see it, and then you're gonna cut around. I'll show you that when I'll show you the fabric and the pattern pieces as well. Also, make note of your cutting layout. Now for view A, you have 44 to 45 inch width nap, which means that the fabric is going in one direction, and then you have 58 to 60 inch width nap as well. So here are your cutouts, and make sure you also have pattern piece 1, 2, and 8 cut out with the wrong side of the pattern piece for those pieces face up. All right, also you will need to cut 3 and 4 of interfacing. So pattern piece number 3 and 4, make sure you interface those as well. We'll talk about view B, which is the skirt here shortly, but you will also need to cut pattern piece number 10, 11, and 12 for the skirt. So now that we talked about the cutting layout, let's go ahead and get into the instructions for view A. So total that you are looking at about 22 steps, but I'm gonna try to go through this and not have you go back and forth to the sewing machine so much. So just make sure that some of the steps, we will do several steps at once. So just make note of that as well. All right. So I'm not going to walk you through every step that we're going to do because we will be doing this as I walk you through the steps for this sew along. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct the top, view A. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct view A, the top. The first pattern piece is pattern piece number 1, which is your front. You need to have the wrong side of this pattern piece facing up, right side of the of the pattern piece facing down on the fabric, and you're going to cut around. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece that you need is pattern piece number 2, which is your back. You need to have this pattern piece with the wrong side facing up, the right side of the fabric facing down, right side of the pattern facing down on your fabric, and you're going to cut around. Make sure you cut one unfold of fabric. Next pattern piece that you will need are your facing pieces. It's pattern piece number 3. This is your front facing. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of inner facing. And make sure when you cut this piece, you have the grain line straight across. You don't want to just cut it like this. No, you want to cut it like this at an angle, okay? So this is pattern piece number 3. You need to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of inner facing. Next is pattern piece number 4, which is your back facing. You need to cut 1 unfold of fabric and make sure you cut 1 unfold of inner facing. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 6, which is your casing. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece is your neck, not your neck, but your armhole facing, which is pattern piece number 5. You need to cut 2 of fabric. And also on this one, you need to make sure that you have the arrow straight across and then cut around. Do not cut it just straight across like this, okay? Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 7. Now this is your peplum front. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Make note of which way you make your pleats. So when you cut it, you need to make sure that on the wrong side of your fabric, you make a little arrow to show which direction you need to form your pleats, okay? And I'll show you that here shortly. And then you need pattern piece number 8. You need to have the wrong side of this pattern facing up, the right side of the pattern facing down on your fabric, cut around, and you need to cut 1 unfold of fabric. The last pattern piece that you will need is pattern piece number 9. You will not cut this out of fabric. This is your elastic guide. You just need to cut 1 of elastic, okay? Now that's all the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct this top. So let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the instructions. So on step number 1, there's already an issue. That's why I'm getting the instructions out. So on step number 1, it says to stay stitch neck edge of front sections. I will do that when I do my pleats to where I'm not running back and forth to the sewing machine. So what you need to do is to make pleat on inside. Now inside means the wrong side of your fabric. So I'm gonna make a note on my pattern and write inside equals wrong side of fabric. All right, so now that I have made that note, it tells you to stitch along those broken lines to the small dot and then press your pleats away from the center. So you're gonna press your pleats towards the side. Now, one thing I wanna make note is where it says inside, that's supposed to be outside, which is the right side of your fabric. And it will make sense simply because if you think about it, if you make your pleats, now I have done one, so I'm gonna show you this one. If you are to turn, this is the wrong side. I'm sorry, this is the wrong side and the other side is the right side, okay? So if you were to make your pleats and sew right here, guess what? Your bobbin thread is on the right side of your fabric. So what you need to do is move your pleats over to the right side of your fabric instead of the wrong side of your fabric, okay? So I forgot to put, this is the wrong side and not the right side. All right, so what you need to do is you need to move your pleats like I have done it right here. So I'm just gonna show you this one. So I have my dot, I'm going to move it over to the last dot and I'm going to pin. Then what I'm going to do is from the bottom, I'm gonna start at the bottom using a regular length stitch and stitch up to that dot and back stitch. Then base along the bottom just to hold my pleat there. Using my seam roll, I'm going to press my pleats down, okay? So go ahead and do that and do not forget to stay stitch your neck edge as well. Go ahead and do step 1 now. All right, so now that you have stay stitched along the neck edge You have also finished off your pleats and you have basted along the bottom edge. Next thing you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to sew the center front seam. So make sure you grab your pins and put right sides together. And what you're going to do is go ahead and pin the center front sections together now. All right, so now that I have my center front seam pinned, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're gonna start at the lower edge and then stitch all the way up to the dot, making sure you back stitch at the beginning and also back stitch at the dot. Do not go past this dot. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and did right side together and stitched the center front seams, I went ahead and finished it off as well. So this is the wrong side finished off, and pressed my seams over to one side. It doesn't matter which side you press them to. And then on the right side, this is what it's looking like so far, okay? So now what you need to do is go ahead and grab pattern piece number 2, and with right sides together, we're going to attach pattern piece number 1 to pattern piece number 2 at the shoulder seam. So grab pattern piece number 2. Now, I did not label my pattern piece number 2, so I'm gonna go ahead and label this before I open it up so I know which side is the wrong side of my fabric. So if you have not done that and you're using a solid like I am, go ahead and do that now. All right, so I'm gonna open it up, and this is the right side of my fabric facing up. I'm gonna go ahead and put pattern piece number 1 on top, and I'm going to go ahead and pin at my shoulder seams on both sides. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned, a couple of things. Now, I have not done my stay stitching on the back, but I will do that now at the sewing machine. So what you need to do for the back is stay stitch before you attach your shoulder seams, okay? So you're gonna start at the center, go to one side, then flip your back over and then start back at the center and go to the opposite direction. Stay stitch the back seam or back pattern piece as well as like you did for the front. Now what you don't want to do is skip this step, because when you go to attach your facing piece, it will not look right, okay? You'll have the back drooping and everything because you were lazy and didn't want to stay stitch. So make sure you stay stitch the back pattern piece, and then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew across your shoulder seams. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have went ahead and attached front to back at shoulder seams, I went ahead and serged it, but then realized that we have a facing, so it's supposed to be encased, but if you serged it also, that's perfectly fine. And I also went ahead and stay stitched the back edge. Now that we have done that, go ahead and move your top or off to the side and grab pattern piece number 3 and 4, which are your facing pieces. So you have your front facing and your back facing. And what you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to attach pattern piece number 3 to pattern piece number 4. So what it's going to look like is like this. Make sure the portion where your dots are facing down in like a V, okay? So then what you're going to do is go ahead with right sides together, pinning at your notches. You're going to pin both of your shoulder seams area now and then press them open. So basically go ahead and pin across both shoulders, matching up your notches, and then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, sew across both of your facing piece. This is your shoulder seam area of your neck facing, and then press your seams open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have right sides together and you sewn across your shoulder seam and you went ahead and pressed them open, the next thing you want to do is with right sides together, you want to pin the front portion where the dot is across the front facing piece. So go ahead and pin at that dot and then pin across. And now that you have it pinned, you're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning, and then you're going to sew stopping at this dot. So go ahead and do that now and press your seams open. All All right, so now that I have my center front sewn from the bottom up to that dot, I pressed it open and I went ahead and finished my, my edge. All right, so go ahead and grab your top. And then with right sides together, we are going to attach our facing to this front neck edge, okay? So now what you're going to do is basically attach with right sides together. So make sure that you pin where that dot is. Make sure you have it matched up. And then you're going to pin all the way around. Now make note of these 2 notches that you have in the back of your top as well as the back of your facing. So you're going to make sure that lines up and pin there. I'm also going to pin my shoulder seam. Make sure you match up your shoulder seams. And make sure that the shoulder seams is pressed towards the back of your garment, okay? You don't want to have it pressed towards the front. Pin there at your shoulder seams, both shoulder seams. So I'm going to pin the other one as well. And now I'm going to pin all the way around my facing. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the facing pinned onto my top, I'm going to start at this dot. And using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to backstitch at the beginning, sew all the way around, and then come back to this dot and backstitch at the end. Now, one thing I want to make sure that you know that you stitch, and as you get around the shoulder seams, make sure you pivot and stay lined up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have went ahead and attached my facing onto my top, the next thing you want to do is go ahead and trim it down. So trim it down to about, I want to say about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my neck facing trimmed down, what you're going to do is press your seams towards the facing. So what you're going to do is press the seams, make sure that it's down towards the facing, and then you're going to understitch on the right side. Understitch is done at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So when you press your seam allowance towards the facing, make sure you are stitching on the facing 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge or from this press edge right here, okay? So go ahead and do that now, all the way around your facing. Once you've finished off your facing by understitching, you're gonna go ahead and sew your side seams. Make sure you pin at the notch, pin at the top, and then pin at the bottom. And then what you're going to do is using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're gonna backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and then finish off your side seams. Go ahead and do your understitching and your side seams now. All right, so now that I have my facing on, I went ahead and sewn my side seams. I'm going to turn it right side out so you could see this, all right? Now, one thing that I will mention is I did go ahead and put my label in the center back right here. Now, the only thing that's left for me to do regarding the facing is go ahead, after you understitch, go ahead and turn your facing into the inside. Give it a really good press, and then you're going to top stitch. All right, so after you press it, you're going to top stitch all the way around your facing. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and pressed my facing to the inside, I went ahead and top stitched all the way around. Now I did some personal preference stuff, like I stitched along the center front. And the reason why I did that is to keep my facing towards the inside to where it's not flopping up or anything. I also did the same thing by top stitching along my shoulder seams, the back shoulder seam, the back one, to where it'll stay down and not flopping up underneath. I also did that on this shoulder seam as well. and then I top stitched all the way around. Now the next thing we're going to do is the armhole facing, all right? But I want to say this. So right now, you might want to try it on your top and see how it fits, okay? Now, I'm going to show you how you do the armhole facing, putting it together. However, I'm not putting armhole facing on mine. I'm going to hack this and put sleeves on mine. Reason being is because after I tried mine on, I know I'm not gonna like it with the armhole facing, so I'm going to put a puff sleeve on mine, and the sleeve that I will be using is New Look 6698. Now, I have a tutorial on how to do the puff sleeve, so if you wanna do the same thing, I'll go ahead and link it above so you could see how to do that puff sleeve by going to that tutorial, okay? So, I'm just gonna show you how you put the armhole together. However, I will not stitch it onto mine. I will go ahead and do my sleeves last. After I'm completely done constructing everything else, I will do my sleeves last, okay? So go ahead and move your top out of the way. And what you want to do is grab pattern piece number 5, your armhole facing. Now, even though I cut it out, I'm just not going to be working with these for my top, all right? So I'm going to mark it like I would normally mark it. It's still a sew along. All right, and then what you're going to do, I'm just gonna put one out of the way. What you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to go ahead and stitch the ends right here. You're going to stitch across. Now you're going to stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have your armhole facing attached at the ends, right? Go ahead and press the seam open if you have not done so already. And then what you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to press all the way around. So go ahead and do that now. Armhole facing press with wrong sides together. So I pressed it with wrong sides together. So this is what it's looking like. So now if you grab your top, this is what you are to do. Now, like I just said, I will not be using the armhole facing, but I'm gonna show you what you're supposed to do. All right, so the part right here, this is your underarm seam. So you're going to pin with right sides together. You're going to pin there. Then you also have this dot, and this dot matches up to your shoulder seams. So you're going to pin that dot to your shoulder seams, okay? So I'm just gonna turn it, and I'm going to pin that dot to my shoulder seams. Now you have some notches. Match up your notches to the back and the front of your garment. So there's a notch there and there's a notch there. So I'm going to match that notch up. And then you want to match up the other side as well. And then after you match up the other side, making sure everything is nice and neat. If you need to, you could clip into your top a little bit so it could give a little bit, and you're going to kind of stretch it a little bit to ease onto the armhole, but just pin all the way around. And using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to I would start at the side seam, back stitch at the beginning, and sew all the way around your armhole using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you do that, you're going to press the seam allowance up towards your armhole facing and trim it down, okay? Once you trim it down, you're going to take this pressed edge and fold it in to where you will be covering up the raw edge. Press that in and then top stitch. Now, well, first make sure you understitch first. So let me back up. After you sew 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, trim it down and then understitch, okay? So you're going to understitch on the facing. So it's going to look like this. You're gonna understitch on the facing and then turn that to the inside and top stitch, all right? If you have any questions, let me know. So just go ahead and pin. So 3/8 of an inch all the way around. Once you sew 3/8 of an inch all the way around, make sure that you press your seam allowance up towards the facing, and then you're going to understitch on your facing. Once you understitch on your facing, press your facing to the inside and then top stitch all the way around, exactly what we did to the facing piece for your neck edge. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have done your armhole facing, if you're doing so, if you are doing the sleeve, just follow along with me and just install your sleeves. You could do it now and just pause it, or you could do it at the end like I'm doing, because it's not going to affect the outcome of if you do the sleeve now or at the very end, okay? So now what we're gonna do is move our top off to the side and grab our peplum piece. So make sure you grab pattern number 7, which is your peplum front. And make sure you mark the wrong side of your fabric if you have not done so already, like I am doing here. So now a couple of things you want to make note of, all right? So I'm gonna mark this on mine. You can mark this on yours as well. You see where the pleat lines are? So what I'm going to do is I have like little clips. So I'm going to make a little line to signify that my pleats go in this direction, okay? On both pattern pieces. So this is the back, which means that on the right side, I'm going to be going towards the center front, okay? So this is the, you see, this is the center front. So your pleats need to be going in the direction of the center front seam. So when you turn it over to the right side, when you make your pleats, you need to be making sure that this pleat goes over to this side and then this pleat goes over to that side to where it's looking this direction, okay? So this is the right side of the fabric. You do the same thing on pattern piece number 7 on this one as well. So make sure you make your arrows now. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have made your arrows on pattern piece number 7, which is your peplum front, this is just one of them that I have already done for you. I'm gonna show you how to do it on this one, okay? So if you look at the back, it looks like my arrows need to go in this direction. So what I'm going to do is take this, well, I have notches, but if you did not, just make sure you know where you're supposed to go to. So I have 2 notches, so I am going to match up the notch right here, both notches, and I'm going to pin. And then I'm going to take my second clip and move it over to the right, well, the left of me, and then pin as well. Now what I'm gonna do is go to the sewing machine, and I'm gonna use about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to baste across the portions that has a pleat and then press my pleats down. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the peplum front pleats inserted in both of the peplum front, what you're gonna do is go ahead and grab pattern piece number 8, which is your peplum back. And what we're going to do is with right sides together, we're going to attach the peplum front to the peplum back. So this is the right side, and we're just going to attach, making sure you match up your single notch with your single notch right here. So go ahead and do that on both sides. So you're going to pin at your notch, pin at the top, and pin at the bottom. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have both of the side seams pinned for the peplum section, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and then finish off your seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have the front attached to the back at the side seams, go ahead and attach the pattern piece number 7, which is your center front seam. That's where you have the 2 notches. Make sure you go ahead and pin there. And then pin at the top and the bottom. And then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and then finish off your seam allowance however you choose to finish them off. I am using my serger, so just finish off your seam allowance the way that you would like. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my center front seam sewn right here, and I also finished off my seam allowance, you can press it whichever direction you want. That's completely up to you. Now what you want to do is go ahead and move the peplum out of the way for just a quick second. Grab pattern piece number 6, which is your casing. And you're pretty much gonna do the same thing that you did to your armhole facing for pattern piece number 6. So you should have 2 of pattern piece number 6. And what you're going to do is you're going to attach with right sides together, which I have them right sides together. You're going to go ahead and sew up the side seams. So using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew both side seams now and press your seams open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my casing, you know, sewn with right sides together, and then on the unnotched edge, I went ahead and created a 3/8 of an inch seam line and pressed it up that 3/8 of an inch seam line. So now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and attach it where I have the notches to my peplum. So go ahead and grab your peplum piece. And then what you wanna do is with right sides together. So basically turn your peplum right side out, and then make sure that the casing is wrong side out, and you're going to basically put the peplum in between the casing. I know it sounds crazy. And make sure you match up your side seam. So go ahead and match up your side seam and make sure that on the peplum area, if you did what I did and serged just in one continuous seam, make sure that is pressed towards the back of the peplum instead of to the front, and then go ahead and pin there. Do that to the other side as well and pin all the way around the casing and the peplum now. All right, so now that I have my casing pinned onto my peplum using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna start at the side seam, backstitch at the beginning, and sew all the way around and backstitch at the end. Make sure you only pulling on your casing to fit onto your peplum. Do not pull the peplum, okay? So go ahead and do that now, basting your casing onto your peplum. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and attached the casing onto my peplum area, this is my center front right here. What you want to do is turn it to where the peplum is on the casing is on the inside, but you want to make sure that you have the entire thing to the inside, okay? And then what you want to do is with the top right side out, you want to slide the top on the inside of the peplum, okay? Now make sure you are matching up your center front seams when you do that, and make sure you matching up your side seam as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my center front seam and match that up to the center front seam of my top. So basically, since this is the center front seam right here, I want to make sure I match that up to that center front seam and pin there. Making sure that your casing is also down, okay? So you want to make sure that you have your casing down as well. And then you want to pin there. All right, make sure you match up your side seams. I would match up my side seams next and pin there as well. Now, you don't want to have it up like this. Just make sure that you are pinning right on top of that seam, okay? So pin your side seam making sure that your side seam allowance is facing towards the back of your top. Pin the other side seam and then pin all the way around. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way around my top to my peplum, I'm going to start at the side seam and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way around, and then back stitch at the end. Once you do that, go ahead and finish off your seam allowance and press it down towards your peplum. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and finished off my seam allowance, after I attached it and everything, I pressed the seam allowance down towards the peplum. Now what I'm going to do is turn it right side out. And what I did, you could do this now or you could wait until the end. I went ahead and searched the hem of my top, and this is a stitching at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I am going to press it up. I'm just going to press under one time and then sew my hem in place. So I'll do that in just a moment. It's just, you know, basically because I'm just already finished it off. So I'm just going to press that under the 5/8 of an inch, and then on the right side, I'm going to stitch it down in place in just a second. Now, the only thing that's left to do is the casing. So what you want to do is, you have this that was pressed 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to press this up and make sure that it's pressed and flat all the way around. So go ahead and press that up all the way around your peplum now. All right, so now that I have my casing pressed up, what I'm going to do is start at the side seam. So I'm going to start about right here at the side seam, leaving enough of an opening in order to insert the elastic, okay? So I'm gonna leave about a good inch and a half opening. So make sure you're not pinning through both layers, just pin where you wanna leave that opening at. So I'm just gonna pin about right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch the top portion, but I want to be sure that I stitch to where I am catching the bottom portion all the way around. Now make sure you are only sewing on one layer, and you're going to pin and sew all the way around. Now you do not necessarily have to pin if you do not want to, but I feel that it's easier if you are a beginner. So I would pin the casing in place and then sew as close to the edge as possible, about 1/4 of an inch away. All right, so go ahead and do that. After you do that, you're going to take a safety pin with your elastic and insert it into your casing all the way around. Make sure you adjust the elastic in order to fit. Once you insert it all the way around, what you're going to do is fold the elastic over on itself, make some zigzag stitches on it, and then pull it through and try your garment on, okay? So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I finished off with my casing all the way around, I made sure to top stitch as close to the edge as possible. So if you grab your elastic guide, pattern piece number 9, you should have cut some elastic, whichever size that you cut for your top. So I cut a size 18, so I went ahead and made elastic the length of that elastic guide, okay? That's pattern piece number 9. Now what I'm going to do is, through that opening that I left right here, I'm gonna take my elastic and I'm going to insert it all the way around, okay? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have went ahead and sifted all the way around, I'm going to make sure that I loosen it up and try it on and make sure that the elastic is not bunched up or tangled all the way around. So distribute your elastic all the way around now. All right, now once you give it a good try on, what you need to do is go ahead and close up the elastic once you have a good fit by zigzag stitching it. Once you do that, close up the rest of that casing by going ahead and stitch across right here. After you do that, the only thing that's left for you to do is go ahead and turn up your hem and hem it in place. Once you do that, you are all done with your top. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So stay tuned. Just hold on one bit as we go ahead and sew along. Same pattern, new look 6668. Now we are transitioning into sewing the skirt. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the skirt portion of this tutorial, which is view B. Take note of the cutting layout if you have not done so already. So what we're gonna do is it's only 8 steps that you're going to do. So this should be a quick, fast, and easy tutorial for you to do, which is the skirt, and that's pattern pieces 10, 11, and 12. So let's go ahead and get into those pattern pieces. So you have pattern piece number 10. You should have cut 2 on fold of fabric. So let me show you that. This is pattern piece number 10. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Now, just to mention, I cut 4 inches off of the bottom of mine because I feel like it's going to be extra long and I might have to cut some more off, but that's a personal preference. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 11. You need to cut 2 of fabric. And the last pattern piece is pattern piece number 12, which is your lower facing, and you need to cut 2 unfolded fabric. Now, one modification that I am making is I am making pockets. Now, these pockets are from Mimi G's The Diana. I think it's the Diana dress. I believe that's where I got the pockets from, but you could pull it from any pocket pattern if you choose so. I didn't feel like just enlarging the pocket pattern that I have done myself. All you need to do is put your hand there, make a straight line. So if you want to draft your own pockets, make a line about 8.5 inches straight down and then trace around your hand, and that's basically it. So that's what you can do. If you want to just draft your own pockets, which I have done so also. I'm just using these pockets because it's a longer skirt. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this tutorial. So go ahead and grab pattern piece number 10. And the first thing you're going to do is stay stitch the upper edge of both the front and the back. Now, pattern piece number 10 is both the front and the back of the skirt. So you're going to use one of the pieces for the front and the other piece for the back of the skirt, okay? So just go ahead and stay stitch along the top edge. And what you're going to do, or you don't have to do it this way, but this is how I'm going to do it. Let me put one off to the side. And what you're gonna do, or what I'm going to do, is start in the center, stay stitched to one edge, then flip it over, and then stay stitched to the other edge. Go ahead and do your stay stitching now. All right, so now that I have the stay stitching done to the top portion of my skirt, the next thing I'm going to do is grab my pocket pattern piece, okay? Now, here's a couple of things about the pockets, right? If you do not want to do pockets, you do not have to, but the only thing that you need to do is make sure, I'm gonna grab my pattern piece, and I'm gonna make sure my pockets is at least 1.5 inches from the side edge. So there is a notch right here, and I suggest testing it out. So you should have a notch right here on your pocket, right? And what you want to do is make sure that if you pin it right there, where your notch is, that when you try it on, it's not all the way up to where you can't really put your hand in your pocket comfortably. So make sure that when just pin it and then kind of hold the skirt up to yourself and see if it works out perfectly for you, okay? So I'm pinning my pockets right there at that notch on both sides. So let me grab my pins. And you just want to pin at that notch, pin top and bottom. And And then using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're gonna backstitch at the beginning and finish off that seam allowance. However, I am finishing off the seam allowance about 1 inch past my pockets on both sides. I will definitely sew both of my side seams together. So I'm just going to sew from the top to about an inch, inch and a half below the pockets. Go ahead and do that now, and then whichever one that you want to use for your front piece, make sure you understitch only the pockets for the front, okay? Do not understitch the back. So go ahead and add your pockets to the front and back of your skirt now. All right, so now that I have the pockets sewn on and finished off underneath, what you're going to do is attach with right sides together, front to back at the side seams. So if you add pockets, you're going to have to close those up. So what you're going to do is basically with right sides together, I turned it so you could see the side seams, and you're gonna pin both side seams. So basically, if you have pockets, just line up your pockets and you're going to pin the length of your skirt. So go ahead and pin the length of your skirt now. All right, so now that I have the sides pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna start at my hem, backstitch at the hem, come all the way up to this dot right, well, you can't really see the dot, but it's a small dot, which is about an inch from the pocket, where the pocket ends. If you do not have a marking there, go ahead and make a marking about an inch up from where the pocket ends. Make it and put a pin there. You're going to backstitch at the hem, starting at the hem, backstitch at the beginning, sew up to this pin right here or your dot, break your threads, and then you're going to start right here, which I have a little dot there, you probably can't see it. Start right here, backstitch at the beads, backstitch here, and then sew all the way up to the end. Once you do that, you're going to sew around your pocket using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. Once you sew both your side seam and your pockets, go ahead and finish it off. Do that to both sides. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the side seam sewn with right sides together, I finished off my pockets. My pockets is looking good. My side seams are done. I made sure to finish off the side seams as well. So now what you're gonna do is go ahead and move your skirt out of the way for just 1 second, and then grab pattern piece number 11, which are your yoke front and back pieces. All right, so this is what you're going to do, is you're going to pin the side seams, both sides. So you have a notch there, so pin at your notch, then pin at the top and the bottom on both sides. All right, now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew both sides now. Go ahead and do that now and then finish off your seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my yoke front and back sewn right sides together, I sewed the side seam. So the next thing you're going to do is attach your yoke to your skirt. So go ahead and turn your yoke to where you have the notches up at the top and the portion that doesn't have notches, you know, at the bottom. So what you're going to do is slide your skirt inside of your yoke. Make sure you have your skirt with the right side out, okay? And then what you're going to do is make sure you match up the side seams of your skirt. So I'm going to make sure my side seams are matching up, and make sure whichever direction you have your pockets and your seams, your yoke is going in the same direction, okay? So once you line up your side seam, you want to go ahead and pin at both side seams. And then you also want to pin at the notches in the front or back of your garment, wherever the back is where you have the back. See, I did a F for front, B for back on the inside of my skirt, so I know which way is the back and which way is the front. So make sure you are matching up those notches in the back of your skirt, and you're going to pin there. You should have 2. And if you need to pin additional spots, you can do so as well. So I'm gonna pin that next notch. Then I'm going to pin the side seam of my skirt. So I'm gonna pin right here at the side seam. And then I'm going to pin all the way around my skirt. So go ahead and pin all the way around your skirt now. All right, so now that I have my yoke front and back pinned onto my skirt, I'm gonna start at the side seam, and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning, so all the way around and back stitch at the end. Go ahead and do that now. Also, once you're done with that, go ahead and trim your seam allowance down and press your seam allowance up towards the yoke. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the yoke attached, I went ahead and pressed it down. I know I said press it up towards the yoke. Do not do that. Press it down towards the skirt, okay? So make sure that you press your seam allowance down towards the skirt instead of up towards the yoke, okay? Now, after I did that, I'm not sure which instruction, what number we are in the instructions, so I'm gonna grab them so you can see the instructions. All right, so on number 4, it says to press 1 3/8 on the upper edge of your yoke to the inside. The inside means the wrong side of your fabric. The outside means the right side of your fabric. So you're going to press it to the wrong side of your fabric, which will start forming the casing for you to draw your elastic through. Now, once you press that, the 1 3/8 of an inch to the inside, you're going to press under 1/4 of an inch and then stitch that in place. Now, you want to make sure that you leave a good enough opening in order for you to insert your elastic, okay? So that's why it says stitch close to the lower edge of casing and then leaving an opening to insert your elastic. So go ahead and do that. So what I did was I create a line for me to press under, and then I'm going to press under 1/4 of an inch all the way around and then encase it. And so on the right side of your fabric to encase it all the way around. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my casing folded down and I stitched along the top, so now, and I left an opening right here about 1 inch apart. So now what you want to do is grab your elastic that you measured the length of your elastic guide, put a safety pin in one end, and then you're just going to basically sift it all the way through. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, so now that I have mine sifted all the way around, what you're going to do is go to your, go wherever you need to go, try it on, and then see if you need to tighten it up or take it out. And then if you have a good fit, you're just going to fold it over and then zigzag stitch a couple of times and close up that elastic. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my elastic in, I tried it on, made sure that it fits. I also put my label in the back portion of my skirt. All right, so now you're gonna move your skirt off to the side, and we're just gonna work on the last thing, which is our lower facing. Okay, so you should have cut 2 on the fold of fabric, and this is the bottom portion of your skirt. So what you're going to do is, with right sides together, you're just going to attach at the side seams. So it is very long. So what you're going to do is, with right sides together, attach both sides. So pin at the notch, and then pin at the top and at the bottom. So pin at the top and at the bottom. You're gonna do this for both sides, and then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And once you do that, go ahead and finish off your seams however you've been finishing off your seams. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our lower facing attached together, right sides together. I also press under 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on the upper edge, like it says in the instructions. That's the edge that does not have the notches at the bottom. All right, so now go ahead and grab your skirt. So what you want to do is you're going to basically slide your skirt inside of this long casing, okay? So what you want to do is make sure that the side with the notches, you want that to be laid down on your table facing up. So facing this way, okay? And then you're just going to place your skirt inside of that, like so. And then what I would do is first match up the side seams, okay? So try to lay your skirt. It is very, very huge and all of that good stuff. So try to lay your skirt as flat as possible to get it all the way in if you can, okay? And then what you're going to do is try to match up your side seams first. So here is a side seam. I'm going to match that up to this side seam as well. And make sure that you are, your seams are matching up all the way across, okay? So I'm just going to pin my side seams like so. Grab some pins. And then make sure you find the other side seam and do the same thing, okay? So don't worry, if you want, you can start pinning all the way around because you will need to, which is what I'm going to do. I'm gonna pin all the way around my skirt and then I'll show you what that looks like. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way around, what you're going to do is start at a side seam using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to sew all the way around your casing. Once you do that, you are going to go ahead and finish off your seams however you choose, and then press the seam up towards the skirt portion, all right? Once you do that, you're going to do exactly what you did for your top and encase it and basically just sew close to the edge, okay? That's all you're going to do. Basically, after you do that, you're going to understitch. After you understitch, you're going to go ahead and fold this up and close that out, all right? All right, so now that I went ahead and attached my lower facing to my skirt, I went ahead and understitched. So I made sure to press the seam allowance towards the facing, and then I understitched that, okay? Now that portion that you pressed up, that was 3/8 of an inch, all you're going to do is make sure that that portion is a little over that stitching line. You're going to pin on the right side. Now you can hand stitch it if you would like. You guys know I'm one who's a little lazy on the hand stitching side. So since this is not a traditional skirt or a business skirt, I can wear this to work. But I would rather wear it just like as a summer skirt. And I can use this for hashtag Sew Maxi for Mother's Day as well. So all I'm going to do is make sure this folded edge is a little over that stitching line. I'm going to pin on the right side all the way around. And then once I do that, I'm just going to top stitch all the way around, making sure I catch in that seam. Once you do that, you are all done with your skirt. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing.